The girl who once raced her brothers through the godswood could not recall the last time her feet knew soft moss. Stone, sand, shattered slate. Those were the shapes that had cupped her soul since the day she was carried from Winterfell. Lyanna Stark rested against the cold inner wall of the Tower of Joy, wind from the red mountains of Dorne hissing through arrow slits like the whispers of restless ghosts. Her breaths were shallow, not from fear but from the ache of new stitches drawn tight across her side. Dawn's first gray washed over her, and she was certain the sky had never looked so colorless above the green fields of the north. She smelled blood, milk, and crushed lavender, a fragrance Rhaegar favored, and she tasted iron at the back of her throat. Somewhere below, the last of the Dragon Prince's guards were saddling horses, their armor chiming like distant bells. Rhaegar himself had ridden east at sunset, the harp at his back, and his words bittersweet upon departing lips. "Rest, my lady of winter roses. I will return with peace. Peace." The syllables scraped inside her skull. Outside the tower walls, 10,000 men were marching. Stark and Baratheon and Arryn banners whipping in the hot wind, the wolf and the stag side by side. Robert's wrath had been stoked long before Rhaegar's tawny crown of blue roses. And there was the king, Aerys, the mad, still seated on the iron throne, his nails blackened, his beard ragged, his voice a coil of wildfire chanting for heads. Lyanna turned her gaze inward, away from Dawn. The stone chamber had been stripped of tapestries as if the road to spring could be found in bare walls. A single torch sputtered above a birthing bed, its linens still damp with sweat. She set fingers to her belly, feeling the emptiness beneath her skin. A cavern where life had sparked. The child was gone. Hidden, Howland had sworn. Safe. Lyanna's blood beat a mantra. Safe. 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 She rose, muscles trembling, and crossed to the narrow slit in the wall. Far below, the sand-colored courtyard had already swallowed the blood spilled during her flight. 2 guards lay dead beside the well. Howland Reed's small sword had whispered through their throats in the hush before dawn. Beyond the gate, the desert spread in gold and heat toward the sea. A flutter of reed-thin paper lay upon a weathered table, folded once. Her brother Ned's hand had left the note while she slept, she suspected. The words were simple and spare, as the North was. I ride as father's son and bring winter with me. Hold fast. Hold fast. She rubbed her thumb over the smudged ink, hearing Ned's voice in the soft hush of a snowfall. Yet the snowfall was a memory blurred by the clamor of war. In the south, everything smelled of dust and scorched time. How long could a northern heart beat in such heat without hardening into something else? A blade, perhaps. Steel made for killing dragons. Lyanna buckled a leather vest over the bandages that bound her ribs. Her shifts hung loose where a child had been, but breath after breath steadied her. At the foot of the stairs, a sword waited. Narrow and quick, light enough for her arm even in weakness. Its hilt was wrapped in blue cloth torn from a gown she no longer wished to remember wearing. She lifted the blade and felt its balance before slicing air in a slow arc. Footsteps echoed, soft as doubt. Howland emerged from the shadows of the doorway, reeds braided through his dark hair. "You should rest," he murmured, voice broken by miles of running. He carried a pouch heavy with water and a map inked on kid leather. Lyanna's eyes flicked toward the horizon. Rest lies north of the neck, but vengeance rides south. The Cranagman flinched. "Vengeance? Your brother comes, Robert too. What vengeance remains for you?" "Aerys breathes," she said. Simple truth. Bitter as pine sap. He burned Brandon. He burned my father. He called for my brothers, and for me, to answer false charges. He dreams of fire, the way other men dream of love. Brandon's screams are smoke in my hair each night. Howland shifted his weight. He sits behind walls and blades sharper than ours. The King's Guard. I know their oaths. She cut in. Yet honor has edges. Aerys honed them until they bled. She stepped closer, and Howland smelled the sweat of fever and fierce resolve. You swore to keep my secret. I ask now that you keep to it still. Tell Ned only that his sister rides to end the war in her own way. If I fail, he will find another path. Your wounds, they are not mortal. She gripped the Crannogman's forearm. If I ride today. Each hour we linger risks my brother's fury clashing with the king's madness. Too many will die. Howland's green eyes flicked to the birthing bed, to the silent proof of what had come to pass. The child is safe, she whispered. Safer if I succeed. Silence gathered like dew. At last, Howland drew a breath that seemed to shrink him smaller, as if the weight of what he agreed to pressed his bones tight. You cannot ride alone. I have you? I am no knight. You are Howland Reed, she said, as if naming a sword of legend. You saved me once beside the Isle of Faces. You saved me again here. One more wound upon honor, and we are even. A sad smile pulled at his lips. Stark math is strange math. He unlaced the pouch from his belt, slipping it over her shoulder. Water for 3 days. The map marks pools no traveler should find, but a daughter of the Neck might. Lyanna nodded once. Together they descended the tower, ghosts haunting corridors the sun had not yet warmed. At the gate they paused by the corpses. Howland knelt for a heartbeat, whispering a prayer to the green man. She spoke none. Her gods had heard too many already. They left the Tower of Joy before the banners of her brother's host crested the ridge. South they rode, skimming the spine of the Red Mountains, careful to keep peaks between themselves and watchful eyes. Lyanna's ribs burned with each jolt, yet each mile carved something clean inside her. Rage sharpened to purpose, sorrow to patience. Revenge, she discovered, was not a fire but an ice river, silent, inexorable, carving stone day by day until even mountains bowed. By sundown the desert gave way to hard-packed earth, dotted with gnarled vines and stone-walled vineyards. Dornish harvesters watched the riders pass without calling out. War taught men to mind their own gates. West of Ghost Hill they found a hollow where a thin spring bubbled beneath pale rock. There they built no fire. Howland wrapped her wound anew and fed her strips of dried goat. Lyanna chewed slowly, tasting sand more than salt. She slept little. Memories stirred. Brandon laughing astride his stallion, Benjen stolen in a snowdrift game, Ned at her shoulder when she first loosed an arrow. Then Lord Rickard's voice, thick with ice pride, promising a crown of honor to the king who should guard the realm. Aerys had replied with wildfire, and honor burned. Lyanna's eyes snapped open to star-pricked dark. The taste of ash remained. At dawn they rode again, veering north now to the Stormlands where Robert's hammer rang loudest. Howland cautioned her that Baratheon scouts might loose arrows at any stranger, but Lyanna would not let roads twist her route. She meant to step from shadow only when the Iron Throne was in sight. That high seat of fused swords, forged by dragon flame, that mocked every promise of safety Westeros had whispered to her since girlhood. They crossed into the reach of Fellwood, and their rumor rode the wind. Aerys had opened the gates of King's Landing to Tywin Lannister's army, trusting in banners once sworn to him. Yet Lannister fidelity was a blade with two edges. The Mad King's vassals whispered of betrayal, of bloody sack, of bells tolling doom beneath red skies. Lyanna listened but did not let hope bloom. Aerys was a man of wildfire. Even betrayed, he would burn his foes. She remembered Ned's tales of Summerhall's smoldering ruin, the prince's birth amid flame. She feared no moot rumor until she smelled corpse smoke herself. Ghostly drizzle greeted them before the Blackwater rush came into view. A pale moon hovered over the river as they forded at a shallow marked on Howland's secret map. King's Landing hulked upon its hill, a sprawl of crooked lanes and tall drop-sided houses, walls lit by the sullen wink of torches. Above all loomed the Red Keep, towers lanced against the stars like iron thorns. A hush of wings passed overhead. Lyanna lifted her gaze. Carrion crows circled the city, dipping low as if drawn by butchery. War had arrived before her, yet the Iron Throne still belonged to the dragon. Somewhere within those walls, Aerys drew breath. She swore he would not draw many more. Howland guided their horses toward a cluster of fishermen's shacks on the river's east bank. They traded the weary animals for a skiff, its owner too frightened by rumors of siege to argue price. At nightfall, they rode beneath the looming hulk of the mud gate. Burned timbers jutted above water, signs of assault. Guards peered over ruined parapets, but hardly glanced at one more skiff among many ferrying refugees. Lyanna kept her hood low. Howland muttered in a guttural tongue few men of the Crownlands knew. Ribald jokes of the neck, he claimed, but they sounded more like prayers. Left in a crush of fleeing smallfolk, they abandoned the skiff and threaded alleys, slick with soot. Fires still smoldered in smashed storefronts. Bodies lay where they had fallen, peasants and gold cloaks alike. Flies already crawling in open mouths. Bells had rung for sack and rape. Now only silence answered. A Lannister soldier leaned against a wall, helm hanging by its strap. Red cloak, dark with rain. His gaze was glassy, his chest split by a gouge that suggested dragon steel. Lyanna knelt beside the corpse, fingers brushing the blood-caked blade beneath his limp hand. It was a short sword, broader than her own but serviceable. She slid it free, cleaned it on the dead man's cloak, and offered it to Howland. They passed the ruins of Cobbler's Square, turned toward Visenya's Hill. Footsteps sloshed through puddles, looters hunting coin among the dead. Lyanna's eyes caught the flicker of torchlight at the mouth of a cross street, and heard a woman's strangled cry. She moved to intervene, but Howland's grip on her sleeve held her. "Justice can't be every stray flame," he whispered. "Our fire is set for the king." She shook him off, yet swallowed the protest. 5 paces later the cry ceased, and silence fell heavy again. They found a grate, hidden behind a midden heap, the iron ladder descending into blackness. Howland had learned of it in a prayer whispered by a silent sister who once knelt beside him at Harrenhal. The tunnel fed sewage from the kitchens of the Red Keep to the river, a forgotten vein in the castle's anatomy. Lyanna dared hope it remained unguarded. They climbed down into stench thick enough to coat tongues. The ladder's rungs were slick, Lyanna's bandages pulled but did not tear. Beneath the city, rivers of filth echoed like distant surf. Rats skittered, pale and swollen. Howland lit a stub of candle, shielding its flame in his palm. For an hour they wound through narrowing tunnels, counting turns until the torch guttered. At last damp stone gave way to hewn walls, cleaner, touched by the fragrance of rich spiced broth. They were beneath the kitchens. A reckless thing to smile in that place, yet Lyanna felt her lips curve. She had run beneath Winterfell's halls as a girl, mapping every twist of secret way. Castles kept the same bones. She pressed an ear to a ceiling vent. Clatter of pots, voices droning complaints of endless orders. The Red Keep still fed its courtiers, it seemed. War or no, courtiers must eat. They ascended a service stair, emerging behind a tapestry sagging between pillars. Footsteps echoed faintly down the corridor beyond. No patrolling guard, merely a page hurrying to fetch more wine for lords licking Lannister boots. Howland whispered. "The throne room lies 2 levels above, past Maegor's Holdfast." Lyanna nodded. "You know the way." "I know the map," he allowed, "but maps do not mark men. I will mark them." She slid the dagger from her belt, its northern steel cold even in the heavy southern air. Each heartbeat drummed, "Brandon, father, north." They ghosted through servants' passages, weaving around the echoing pulse of great halls. Twice they froze in alcoves while Lannister men-at-arms marched past. Helms gilded, crimson cloaks dragging. Once, a Kingsguard knight stood alone before a door of ebony studded with silver. The royal apartments? His white armor was rent and smeared with drying gore, yet his posture spoke forms drilled since Squire's days. Sir Jaime Lannister, though she saw only the back of his golden head. "Not that way," Howland breathed. Stairs ahead. The higher they climbed, the fewer voices. Torches burned low, scarcely tended. Lyanna's shadow stretched long across cracked marble. She passed a shattered suit of armor lying where some statue once stood. A dragon wing, sculpted in stone, lay stubbed like a broken tooth. Each scene of ruin whispered, "The realm is bleeding." At last, twin oak doors loomed. They were ajar, wide enough to admit flickering torchlight and the reek of wildfire. Lyanna eased into the hall. Once, she had stood before Winterfell's hearth and marveled at castles, forged by men with dreams of power. The Iron Throne Hall dwarfed any such dream. Black columns soared to vanishing heights. Stained glass windows glimmered with shapes of dragons devouring suns. Yet everything felt colder than the crypts at Winterfell. Cobwebs fluttered where banners should hang. Pools of pale green liquid streaked the floor in broken rivulets. Wildfire casks shattered in panic. At the far end, upon a dais of fused blades, sat a man thinner than rumor. Aerys Targaryen's silvered beard tangled to his knees. His robes hung like molted skin. No crown adorned his brow, only a twist of hair matted with dried blood. He muttered to himself, fingers working an invisible loom. On either side braziers burned low, their coals smoldering like dragon eyes. A single Kingsguard remained, a tall knight with hair pale as new parchment, face gaunt. Sir Gerald Hightower, the white-bulled Ida. His sword rested across his knees, gaze vacant. If he heard the intruders, he made no sign. Madness or exhaustion cloaked him thick as dust. Lyanna stepped onto the cracked tiles. Her boots scuffed grit, echoing faintly. Aerys paused mid-mutter, eyes lifting. They were yellowed, rimmed red, yet sharp. Too sharp to belong to a dying man. His voice crackled. "Who dares?" "Justice," she whispered, though the hall swallowed the word. Aerys leaned forward, squinting. "A shadow come to drag me into night? No, shadows serve no wolf. Yet I see the froth of winter about you, stark girl. Brandon burned, Rickard burned. You come for cinders?" Lyanna's fingers tightened on her dagger. "I come for the flame." The Mad King cackled, a sound brittle as thin ice. "Flame loves kings. Flame adores me." He raised a trembling hand toward a brazier, as if commanding it to dance. "You will adore it too." Sir Gerald stirred then, the habit of defense jerking him upright. His blade hissed free, white cloak swirling. Howland pressed forward, short sword clutched but untested. Lyanna gestured him back. Some fates were hers alone. The white bull's eyes held regret. "My duty is to guard him," he said, voice a boulder rolling slow. "Even from justice." Lyanna set her stance. Her ribs ached, her breath rasped. "Your duty died the moment he burned innocence." Hightower advanced, sorrow carved in each line of his weathered face. Steel met steel as Lyanna parried. The impact rattled her bruised bones. She pivoted, using her smaller frame to slip beyond his sweeping arc. He pressed, strokes measured, not eager, as though begging her to yield. She offered no such mercy. Howland called her name once, but she drowned him in focus. Blade rang against blade, sparks fizzing like embers. She felt stitches stretch, warm wetness seeping down her flank. The hall spun around a single point of light, Aerys' watching eyes, fever bright. A gap opened. Hightower's guard dipped. Lyanna drove her dagger low beneath his breastplate's lip, felt cartilage part. His breath caught. He staggered, white cloak blooming crimson. She eased him down, whispering a northern prayer. His lips moved, but no sound followed. When he stilled, she rose, drenched in night's blood and her own. Aerys had not fled. He stared, marveling at the stain seeping across marble. "Dragon's eggs crack with heat," he crooned. Green fire hatching everywhere. He reached under the throne seat, fingers scrabbling. When they emerged, they clutched a small, stoppered crystal jar. The liquid within glowed sickly jade. He hurled it toward her. Lyanna leapt aside. The jar shattered, fire whooshing upward, heat licking her face. More jars clattered beneath the throne. Caches of wildfire planted for last defiance. She smelled burning hair, felt sear on her cheek. Aerys laughed like a child squashing ants. "Burn them all," he shrieked to phantoms. "Even the ghosts." She hurled her dagger. It split the madness in his throat. His laughter gurgled, blood foaming green where wildfire residue mixed with his veins. Still, he clawed at another jar, weak fingers slick with his own life. She crossed the dais in 3 strides, seized his wrist, and twisted until bone snapped. The jar rolled away, unbroken. Aerys gazed up as if seeing her anew. "Wolf," he rasped. "Wolves burn too." "Not tonight." She drove steel through his heart. His final breath stank of smoke and betrayal. When she withdrew the blade, he sagged upon the throne that had cut 1,000 kings before him. Silence. Only the hiss of dying wildfire pools broke the hush. Lyanna swayed. Headlight. Howland appeared at her side, bandages in hand, but she shrugged him off long enough to pry the dead king's hand from the armrest. Beneath it lay a lever. One last defense, she guessed. She braced, expecting hidden blades or fire, yet when she pulled it, only a gentle click answered. Somewhere deep within walls, gears shifted, but no doom came. Perhaps the mechanism had broken in sack. Perhaps it had never been finished. A mad dream undone by time. She stepped back. The iron throne loomed empty but for a corpse. She felt no triumph, only the slowing of a storm inside her skull. Revenge was a river. She had reached its mouth, where sweet water met bitter sea. Waves of fatigue crashed, yet her legs locked. She could not fall here, beside the man she killed. Howland's voice floated through haze. "We must go. Lannisters flood these halls. If they find you..." Lyanna blinked. "Let them find a dead king first." She wiped her blade on Aerys' robe. Streaking red across cloth dyed dragon black. Sticky blood clung to her fingers, mingled with wildfire soot. It painted her gray, neither wolf nor dragon, something forged in flames and cooled in ice. Howland guided her down hidden stairs back into guts of stone. Once they heard voices, the clatter of boots rushing toward the throne room. She wondered which banner would claim the kill. Let them argue over her ghost. She had no name here, only deeds. They emerged onto a terrace overlooking Blackwater Bay. Dawn blushed scarlet, reflecting on waters littered with charred wreckage. Smoke coiled from city rooftops. Somewhere bells tolled, these quieter, like morning chimes. Lyanna leaned on the parapet, breath shuddering. Her wound seeped, yet the burning slowed. Beneath her, a garden of lemon trees stirred with salty breeze. She imagined Winterfell's weirwood, its face carved with grief and wisdom. She imagined snowflakes drifting through cool air perfumed by pine. She imagined a child, her child, breathing safe beyond reach of kings. "We are done," she said, not knowing if the words were truth or wish. Howland touched her arm. "Done with fire. The ashes remain. Let maesters sweep them." She straightened. "The north calls." They slipped through half-collapsed postern gates, merging with a stream of refugees flooding out of the burning capital. No one saw a wolf among them. No one noticed when, at the ford of Windwater, the wolf turned north while the Crannogman slipped east on a different path. Secrets needed distance to thrive. Lyanna rode alone beneath cloud-swollen skies, each mile stealing color from her vision until only snow white and steel gray remained. Somewhere ahead, Ned rode south to find a sister lost. Behind her, the realm shifted beneath the weight of a throne suddenly ownerless. Tywin would claim victory. Robert would claim crown. Dragons would be written into ash and song. Yet the tale of how the Mad King died would twist with each singer's whim. For no hall would speak the name of the wolf who came in silence and left only colder silence behind. Night gathered, and stars pierced the dark like new-forged blades. Lyanna Stark dismounted near a stream, knelt, and washed dried blood from her hands. The water ran red and clear. She stared at her reflection, pale face, eyes shadowed, cheeks scarred by wildfire's kiss. No maiden's mirage returned her gaze, only a woman with too many miles tattooed beneath her skin. She whispered to the weirwood trees she could not see, "Guide me home." Then she bound her wound tight, stoked a small fire against the chill, and dreamed of falling snow that never burned. Lyanna. The wind smelled of half-sung dirges and damp pine when Lyanna Stark crossed the first shadow of the neck. Weeks of hard riding had pared the flesh from her frame. but the heart within beat steady, cadenced like a war drum muffled beneath wolf fur. Dawn spread behind her, a wash of bruised purples dissolving into pewter clouds. She had outpaced every road rumor that might trail her. Songs that named Jaime Kingslayer, whispers that named fire, lies that named destiny. But she had not outrun herself. A smear of half-healed stitches tugged beneath her jerkin each time her mare lengthened stride, and the wound forced memory forward with every throb. A hall of wildfire, a dagger lost in the heat of murder, a crown unmade. Before her stretched the causeway, drowned stones, slick with moss and the spittle of slow tides, twisting through a sea of reeds so thick they clattered like spear shafts. In childhood, she had ridden this track beside a father who never spoke an idle word, yet showed her where the bog iron came up and where marsh gas burned blue at dusk. Now the reeds bent to greet a daughter orphaned by flame. Nothing else broke the hush, save the croak of a bullfrog fat with secrets. She reined in at the foot of the first low rise. Two gray-green eyes blinked from the water, vanished. Surfaced closer. The little Crannogman was half submerged, slim as a willow shoot, painted neck down with mud and strands of pale swamp weed. He did not call her name. That was a thing both of them had forgotten on purpose. "Is it done?" he asked instead, voice no louder than rain on thatch. Lyanna nodded once. The gesture hurt. His ashes blow through Blackwater sky. Then the reeds will carry word to Greywater. He waded nearer, dripping green tears from his tunic. "But they will not carry you unless you let them. I ride for Winterfell." She gathered the mare's reins, leather cracked by southern sun. "My brother must see I still draw breath." The Crannogman's smile was sad as marshlight. "Your brother has already ridden past the fever flats. The trident lies between you and his grief." Lyanna's pulse hitched. "He hunts me?" "He hunts phantoms." The man reached into the mire, produced a roll of damp parchment, sealed with white beeswax, the mark of House Reed. "He will find me first. I will tell him what I can." "What you must," she corrected. "No more." A ripple of unease fractured the mud's mirror. "Secrets feed on silence, my lady. And silence is a heavy diet for wolves." She looked north across the misting fen. Beyond those pale veils waited Moat Cailin, the King's Road, the towering bones of barrow mounds older than kingdoms. Beyond all of it lay walls of gray stone and a god's wood, where the heart tree watched seasons bleed. "Wolves may starve," she said, "but so do children when stories eat them." The Crannogman bowed, water sloshing at his thighs. "Then, may the first men lay soft miles beneath your horse." He slipped under the surface with no ripple, vanishing like breath on midwinter glass. Lyanna urged the mare forward, hooves squelching across slick rocks. Each step brought thicker silence. Above, swallows stitched silver arcs through rising mists. She followed the causeway until the sun crested and the bog gave birth to stunted alders whose roots clawed black muck. Gnarled limbs bared knotholes like sightless eyes. She knew the next legends, trees that watched, water that swallowed armies whole. But fear could find no purchase in a woman who had slain a king. By noon she spied abandoned campfires. Ned's host had bivouacked here days past, char rings ringed with trampled sedge. Ravens hopped amid the ashes, quarreling over bread crusts left in haste. She dismounted, crouched, sifted the soot between scarred fingers. The embers were cold. Her brother's shadow had moved on. She whispered a wordless promise to the prince he left, remounted, and pressed northeast where the track edged firmer ground. Hunger grew teeth by dusk. She chewed raw carrot pilfered from some forgotten Stormlander's pack, washed it with water dark as strong tea. When the moon climbed low and swollen, she found high ground enough for a lean-to of bent reeds. Sleep came fitful, undone by a dream of wildfire cracking open stone ribs of the Red Keep. Green tongues licking white marble, screams turning to glass. She woke with a short cry, clutching for a sword no longer in reach. Cold sweat, stung stitches. The mare nickered, sniffing the air where nightmares lingered. She barely felt dawn before moving again. Ned Stark rode beneath banners drenched in rain, yet the grief upon his shoulders weighed heavier than mail. Robar Royce's knights flanked him in dull bronze. Thorin Smallwood kept pace, muttering of the old King's Road's treacherous bends. Ahead, Moat Cailin loomed, a ragged crown of drowned towers jutting from peat. Ned could not see his sister in those ruins, yet no track led south without touching the neck. Each step north was a step toward uncertainty. At his side rode Howland Reed, eyes red as though no sleep had dared alight on his brow. The Crannogmen's account of the Tower of Joy still echoed. Lyanna gone, the guards slain, remnants of blood and lavender. He had told other truths as well, truths that bound Ned's heart in briars. A child born, spirited to Greywater Watch. Mother vanishing into war's mouth. But Howland's voice stuttered to silence any time Ned asked for shapes and names. "I swore oaths," the man said atop his small garron. "And some oaths bind bone." Ned's jaw clenched. "My heart knows too many empty cells," he replied at last. "Fill one. Seek her instead. She will choose which doors to unlock." So Ned sought. He left Robert behind among the joyous shouts of conquest, left the lion's toothy grin and the Tyrell's polished courtesy behind, left the Iron Throne cold with rumor. He sought the sister who had sung of spring hunts and winter roses, the girl he had once lifted to see over Winterfell's battlements. Yet the miles offered only emptiness. Their column navigated the twist of causeway between cairns of ancient stone. Sunset draped gold upon the fens. Gnats swarmed eyes and nostrils. Just past the place locals called Split Reed Ford, a lone barge sat half-sunk, cargo rotted. Ned halted, studying the footprints stamped near its prow. Prints light, heel scuffed, as if left by a rider unsteady. His gut twisted in recognition. "She bled here," he murmured. Every inch of those prints spelled Lyanna, though he had last seen her dancing around the hearth, unburdened by war. Howland dismounted, knelt. He touched dark stains smeared on reed fronds. Not mortal, he judged after a sniff. Days old, perhaps 6. Ned gazed north where the vanishing track blurred into haze. Anguish pressed hot behind his sternum. "Ride," he commanded the knights, "through fading light until light finds us again." Each breath of wasteful sleep is a blade turned against her. The column spurred toward Moat Cailin's shadow. Lyanna reached the ruins' fringe a day prior, unseen. She did not intend reunion in the marsh fortress where father had once parleyed with Southron kings. Too many eyes, too many names. Instead, she picked the lesser track along the western fringe, keeping towers at a distance while dusk dyed them wine-dark. Southbound Sellswards had camped there earlier. She glimpsed coals winking through crumbled merlons, but she skirted them like rumor skirts truth. Beyond Moat Cailin's corpse the land hardened, peat giving way to loam and stands of weather-twisted pine. Here, Northland autumn had already pricked the air. Evenings rasped with chill. Mornings glazed spiky grass with rime. Each inhalation tasted of home and ghost. She acquired a fresh horse 2 hamlets farther, left a pouch heavy with Dragonlord coins in the stable boy's numb hand, took a shaggy gray gelding whose lungs could devour long northern leagues. Mare, spent, would graze until some farmer found her. Fate enough. Lyanna mounted the gelding and felt the world right itself beneath her hips, as though the beast remembered wolves under moon. The King's Road uncoiled north with a familiarity that stung. Yearlings ago she had galloped here to meet Benjen returning from the wall, and they had raced all the way to Winterfell's gate, wagering on dried apples. Benjen's laugh still echoed, adolescent and fearless. Where had that laugh gone? Had war ground it into dust? She pushed the gelding past dawn, past noon, past a cluster of fisherfolk huts where knotted armed women smoked pickerel and hummed songs older than Andal's. None recognized her under hood and grime. None cared. Lords and ladies were myths drifting south like migrating cranes. By late afternoon of the second day, she neared the barrow's rolling sweep. The sun sprawled low, copper disk caught in heather. Crosswinds carried the musk of damp soil, the faint hiss of wind skating over burial mounds. She dismounted for a moment's reverence. Here rested the ancient kings of winter, each mound crowned by a weathered flint cairn. She knelt, pressed palm to ground still warm from sun's caress, and silently begged blessing. Let the old ones see her home. When she rose, 2 riders appeared cresting the road's bend behind, figures armored in partial mail, colors indiscernible in glare. Her heart kicked. She swung onto the gelding, nudged him into a trot, cloak lifted as if by sudden breeze. The riders quickened too. Soon the hollow clatter of hoof on packed earth beat a tempo. Quicker pursuit. Sunset slashed across the road. Shadows elongated. Lyanna urged the gelding forward, but fatigue weighed his haunches. The first rider closed half the gap, cupped hand to mouth, bellowed, "Ho there, girl!" Not Ned. This voice rasped rough as porch rope. She put heels to flank. The gelding surged, stumbled, recovered. Ahead, a narrow track veered into the barrow field. Dangerous footing among hidden sinkholes. She veered. Behind, the second rider cursed. They followed into the tall grass, metal clinking. Lyanna drove deeper between mounds, weaving where only memory of childhood races guided her. She knew stones to avoid, gullies to skirt. The gelding leapt a low ridge, hooves landing on softer turf. One pursuer fumbled, horse sliding, man thrown sideways with a yelp and heavy thud. The other pressed on but slowed. Lyanna angled toward a grove of birch, jittering silver leaves. There lay a creek slick as mirror. She coaxed the gelding down its rocky bed until water masked print and smell. Dusk thickened into gloam. At last she found a snag of overhanging branches to wedge amid, heartbeat hammering in ears louder than frog croak. She waited. Minutes, maybe hours. Owl hoots replaced hoof clatter. When she finally edged out, night reigned. Stars burned like wolf eyes piercing brush. She led the gelding upstream under canopy, careful not to splash. By moonrise she risked fireless camp. Wound reopened in the chase, dark blotch spread across bandage like ink drowning parchment. She rinsed it in chill creek, teeth gritted, bound fresh linen torn from undershift. Pain sharpened each breath, until not even the barrow whispers could reach her over its roar. Yet she slept, and dreamt. She walked Winterfell's yard, clad in armor of frost. Aerys stood before her, beard ablaze with wildfire. But he shrank under her gaze, tin shrinking in furnace. She lifted dawn, the sword morning, though she had never held it, and its blade burned white as weirwood bark. She swung. Fire met ice. Steam billowed and took shape. A babe wailing and swaddling. The child's cry cracked stone, and from that fissure grew a blue rose dripping crimson dew. She woke with salt on cheeks, unsure if tears or sweat. 2 days later, Ned's party discovered the fallen rider beyond the mounds. The man's leg twisted unnatural. His companion was nowhere. Ned dismounted, crouched. The wounded man snarled, brandished dagger, until exhaustion wilted rebellion. Bronze armor bore strange sigil, 3 candles bound by thorn. "Who set you on this road?" Ned asked, cool as winter river. "Gold." The man spat. "Gold sets all men riding." His breath stank of fear and stale ale. Ned pried further, but the sellsword knew little. Rumors of Lady Lyanna traveling alone toward Winterfell. Bounty offered by an unnamed lord wanting proof alive. The witness to that truth had bolted north. His partner said, "With or without coin?" Ned's gut surged mixture of dread and relief. Lyanna still ahead. Unknown hunters as well. He left the sellsword to Maester's care, pressed the column faster. By nightfall, they camped under the Barrow King's stony gaze. Reed built a small fire, mixing herbs to soothe Ned's restless limbs. Sparks spiraled into pitch sky. "Your sister dances near," Howland whispered as they shared broth. "Even the mists told me tonight." Ned stared into simmering pot, as if answers might bob amid carrot peel. "Then why can I not see her?" "The neck hides what loves it." Reed's voice carried half a smile. "But beyond the barrows, there is no mire to veil a wolf. We will see her soon, if foes do not." Ned set bowl aside, rose, walked edge of camp where silent cairns bulked. Kneeling, he set hand to cool stones and prayed. Not foes. Wooden words, hollow. He realized prayer now was less for Lyanna than for himself, that he might stand when truth arrived heavy as burial earth. Lyanna felt Winterfell's nearness in the very tilt of sky. The barrier of mountain and barrow receded. The true north wind licked her face raw. She slowed, savoring each league like pulses of a second heartbeat. Yet caution kept her cloaked. A half-day beyond Middlefast she spied a solitary inn perched on rise, the old Spear's Rest, banner of a rusted pike flapping above sagging eaves. She needed salted meat, new linen, a flask of honeyed water strong enough to scour fever from wound. She tied her gelding under oak, slipped inside. The taproom smelled of wood smoke and onions. 3 traders hunched over dice, a septon half-dozed by hearth, and the innkeep polishing pewter. None lifted eyes at her entrance. The realm overflowed with wayfarers these days. She kept hood drawn, ordered a trencher of rabbit stew and ale watered thin. As she supped, 2 charcoal miners at the far bench spoke low. Say the king was opened like a hog by his own king's guard. One more mad twist. Say Lannister men spread coins to seed that tale. The better to hide the shadow that passed. Lyanna Spoon paused. Shadow, she murmured. A floorboard groaned behind. She sensed the presence of breath before voice cut the hush. Stayed your shadow too long in this light. She wheeled, hand brushing hilt, but it was only a bearded traveler cloaked in patched wolf fur. His eyes were blue as cracked ice, his stance wary yet not hostile. She relaxed fraction. Shadows go where lanterns drive them, she said. Old northern proverb. The man's gaze flicked to the half-healed wound. That lantern's dripping blood. He eased onto a stool nearby, lowered voice. Word circles that Lady Lyanna rides north. Some would cheer, some would chain. I would advise caution. Do you know Lady Lyanna? She asked. Know of her? No, she once chased a boar through Wolfswood and came home with tusks for trophies. He sipped cider. Folk remember stories better than truth. She studied him. Lines at eyes spoke of seasons, not soft court. Fingernails bore black crescents of soil. He might be forester or sellsword turned wanderer. Or he might be a songless knight, armed with knowledge. Who seeks her? She asked. Names scatter like seeds in high wind, he replied. One grain says, Sir Bryce Caron rides with crown pledge, wanting living proof the wolf princess survives. Another grain says Stannis Baratheon hunts, fearing claim ahead of Robert's crown. A third whispers of southern lordlings who'd ransom wolf to lion for new debts paid. Lyanna swallowed stew that tasted suddenly of ash. And you? I cut wood for coin, but I served Ned Stark once at Gulltown, saved by his honor. I cannot ride fast enough to help now, but I can warn. The inn door creaked. 2 riders entered in cloaks of washed-out crimson, dust white at hems. Their eyes swept room. Lyanna felt the world compress. The bearded stranger rose, placed coin on counter. Stable water your horse, he told her. Voice louder than need. Road north clear as dawn beyond the ridge cut. Keep to it. He moved off, melted into kitchen passage. Lyanna finished ale in one swallow, slipped toward rear exit. The red-cloaked riders flagged innkeep. She heard coin clink. Their questions floated on air. Seen a slim girl, dark hair, rides a gray. She ducked into alley as the innkeep answered uncertain. Night deepened. She mounted swiftly, eased horse away with hooves muffled by leaf mold. Hard-hammered yet, she felt a sliver of gratitude for unknown, bearded guardian. She rode through night, guided by frost-silver starlight. Fever ghosted edges of vision, turning pines to black spears. Twice she halted to gulp snow melt from roadside ditch, though no snow yet blanketed ground. Only patches left from early flurry. At false dawn, she glimpsed the first light on Winterfell's distant smoke trail. Kitchens waking. Tears burned unbidden. The towers looked small from afar, nestled in arms of forest and ancient crenellations. Holding Mercy. She might have spurred horse into reckless gallop, but for warning echo, some would chain. She circled east, approached a long stream used by washerwomen, slipped into Wolfswood under gray silence. There, among sentinel oaks, She tethered horse and walked path worn by childhood feet. She skirted stone granary, ducked low beneath arch of the broken outer wall where mason work still awaited repair. Benjen's secret hole for midnight adventures. She emerged inside the yard. No guards posted at breach. Winterfell relied on walls, an unspoken dread of northern wrath. She padded across frost-whitened grass to armory shadow, cloak hood low. Horses snorted in distant stalls. Dogs barked half-hearted. Smoke curled from brazier near smithy. A boy hammered steel, face hidden by shower of sparks. She crossed narrower court, where the hot springs steamed faint. The scent, mineral and moss, hit memory hard. She remembered splashing in shallow pool with Benjen, while Maester Wallis fretted over damp pages. She followed stone path toward Godswood entrance. Voice rang behind, "You there?" She spun. Old Sir Roderick Castle stood, mail half-buckled, gray whiskers stiff with chill. His hand hovered at sword, though eyes squinted unsure. "Remove your hood," he ordered. Lyanna braced, fingers trembling as she lifted cloth. Sir Roderick's breath caught. By the old gods! Tears welled in his eyes. He strode forward, grasped her shoulders. "My lady, we feared." Words broke. He saw wound stain, clucked, called for garrison, for Maester. She silenced him with gentle press of palm. "Later," she said. "Where is Ned?" "South yet, my lady. He rides the neck, returns fast as hooves allow. Ravens were sent but—" His gaze sharpened. "He must know." "He will, but no horns." "I must speak first with the tree." Sir Roderick frowned. But wolves obeyed Starks, living or presumed dead. He escorted her to Godswood gate, dismissed puzzled guards. She passed beneath weirwood boughs into hush of ancient snow and steam. There, before pale-faced bleeding red sap tears, she knelt. She poured everything unshed. The prince's song, the tower's cradle, the king's dying gurgle, the wildfire's kiss, the child's newborn wail, the river of blood and the river of revenge. She whispered names and promises, and begged the tree to remember should men forget. Wind sighed through leaves like thousand-year breath. Somewhere in that sigh she felt judgment and absolution in one pulse, like heartbeats, overlapping. When she left Godswood, she found Maester Wallis bustling with poultices. They led her to bedchamber overlooking glass gardens. Servants washed away journey's grime, stitched wound anew, marveled at half-healed scar on cheek. She slept 3 days straight, drifting between dreams where snow fell gentle and dreams where swords rained iron. On waking, she rose against protests, paced balcony, watching banners whip in winter gust. Gray direwolf on white, Stark of old. On fourth morning, horns trumpeted courtyard. Riders streamed through gate, banners of Stark. Manderley reed. Ned rode point, gray eyes scouring yard. When he dismounted, Sir Roderick spoke low. Ned stiffened, sprinted stone stairs 2 at a time, pushed chamber door with slam. Brother and sister stared like strangers across gulf of war seasons. Lyanna's throat worked soundless. She stepped forward. Ned crossed 3 strides, gathered her into arms so fierce ribs cried. She felt him shake, not weep. Northmen kept tears secret as gold. They parted. Ned searched her face, noting scar, bruised circles. "I found your prints on marsh stone," he murmured. "I prayed each night they would grow no colder." "They led home," she said. He looked to wall, where moonlight painted their shadows. "Home where ghosts roam." "Father, Brandon. Benjen rides the wall now. Even he feels far." He swallowed. "Tell me everything. No walls between us." She told enough. Tower, birth, hiding, flight, king's death. She spared him details of kills, but he read them in eyes. When she spoke of the child, Nen's face bent like young oak in gale. "A boy?" he asked. She nodded. "He bears no name yet fit for songs. Reed hides him deep within Greywater's shifting halls." "Mehtasarno. What will you do?" She shrugged, heartbeat heavy. "I'm a Stark." Winterfell needs Starks, and the realm needs story to mask truth. Robert will take his crown soon. He hunts for a bride he thinks dead. Should he learn I live? Ned paced, cloak swirling. He loved you. He loved the girl he imagined. Her eyes shone iron. I walked King's Hall in fire, Ned. I slew. The girl is buried beside the king. Silence swelled. Then Ned exhaled fog. Robert rides here as soon as he learns you live. Ravens raced ahead, and rumor outstrips wings. We see, ma'am. Then we shape rumor's path, a narrative stronger than sword. They forged plan by hearthlight that flickered like dawn through frosted glass. The maester drafted ravens, each line of ink a calculated omission. Aerys fell by his own wildfire device. Madness ended by accident. King's guards slain heroically by last night's loyal. Lyanna rescued from dungeons, borne north to heal. No wolf's claw, no dagger strike. Jaime Lannister stands accused already, Ned said. The realm will heap legend upon him. One more sin is nothing. Lyanna's gaze drifted to snow-dusted window. She felt guilt twist but steeled. If the lion must wear stripe of dragon blood, he can bear weight. War spares no innocence. They sealed parchments. Ravens flapped into night. Robert Baratheon reached Winterfell first day of moon's wane. Beard bristling, eyes bright with victor's flame. His stallion thundered into yard, hoofs echoing like drums. He dismounted with roar, demanded ale, demanded Ned, demanded Lyanna in same breath. When she descended great stair clad in simple gray, hall fell hushed. Songs had woven her dead. Now she stood tall if scarred, hair braided like winter rivers. Robert crossed rushes thick with rushlight, seized her hands. Gods be good, you breathed. Tears glinted unshed. He looked over shoulder at courtiers crowding door. Stannis John Arryn, which made scene half a court. Leave us, he growled, but Lyanna slipped hands free. Let them stay, she said. What must be spoken belongs to realm as well. She met Robert's startled eyes. Gentle as snow. The girl you crowned with blue roses died in desert sun. In her stead stands a woman who has seen kings bleed. I cannot be wife and forget blood. I cannot share bed and bury truth under goose feathers. And now her. Robert's jaw bunched. The realm needs healing. My crown needs queen who stirs hearts. You are that queen. Your crown will find another. Lyanna's voice soft, yet tremorless. One whose dreams did not drown in wildfire. Stannis' mouth twitched, but he said naught. John Arryn laid steadying hand on Robert's arm. Ned watched, shoulders taut as strung bow. Robert swayed as if struck. Words failed. At last he nodded once, motion jagged, like shield-bearing crack across center. Very well, he said, voice hoarse. If you cannot love me, I will not chain you. He turned away too quickly, hid moisture glinting on beard. Let wedding bells ring somewhere else. He strode from hall, boots thudding like retreating storm. Courtiers scattered after. Silence pooled, broken only by huff of braziers. Lyanna remained still, cold inside but strangely light. Ned approached, rested hand on hers. Some wounds bleed invisible, he whispered. Some must. In days following, ravens returned bearing acceptance of crafted tale. Jaime stood accused by Lannister's enemies. Robert's wrath turned on Lyon and on Targaryen remnants, now scattered across narrow sea. Realm shrugged, and believed what fit hunger for order. Yet truth lingered in Winterfell's stones. Lyanna visited crypt one dawn, descending spiral steps with torch sputtering. Statues of Stark Kings lined walls. Stone darrowwolves at feet. Iron swords rusted across laps. She passed father's new statue. Face chiseled solemn, eyes forever pondering duty. She knelt, placed rose carved from white quartz beneath. I avenged fire with steel, she told him. But winter lingers. Step sounded. Ned descended, cloak whispering. Beside him walked Benjen, face leaner, black as crow. They flanked her in hush of crypt. No words. All three touched Stone Wolf's head. Blood bound them stronger than story. When they rose, Lyanna faced dark arch leading deeper. "One day the child will stand here," she said, barely breath. "He will ask why songs hide his mother." Ned's voice low. "We will answer with truth when walls are thick enough to hold it." "And if truth hunts him?" Benjen asked. Lyanna's hand brushed scar. "Then the wolf teaches the pup to bite." They left crypt together. Above, the first snow of true winter fell, thick and lazy flakes swirling in glooming light. Lyanna lifted face, eyes closing. The cold stung, but it was clean, and in that purity, she felt pulse of two hearts. One in her chest steady, one far to southeast in shifting bog tower, beating smaller, quicker yet echoing same cadence. Winter had come, but the river of revenge had met its sea and dispersed into quiet, lapping tides. Lyanna Stark walked courtyard as flakes settled on cloak, and each breath painted white plume. Like dragon smoke made innocent again. Night would fall, more choices would carve the future. But for this singular turning of world, she was home, alive and fierce enough to hold the weight of unsung truth. And the north, sensing blood return to stone, howled approval beneath argent moon. Hey Nikau. Pale sifting snow was falling on Winterfell by the second week of Lyanna's return. A slow, steady settling that rhymed the rooftops and softened the lines of every stone. It was the kind of snow that brought memory with it. For each flake whispered of years and faces lost, of childhood hunts and old lessons delivered in the hush before dawn. Lyanna moved through the keep like a revenant, half familiar and half strange, met by stares that could not decide whether to weep or kneel. Servants greeted her with wary deference, unsure if the wolf they thought long dead was yet flesh or dream. She returned each glance with the quiet courtesy of a Stark, but she was never alone in the corridors. Ghosts padded at her heels with every step. She made herself walk the walls, felt the bite of the wind against the scar on her cheek, drank in the cold as if it might burn away the fever that sometimes lingered in her bones. She visited the crypts twice in 3 days, alone the first time, and with Benjen on the second, speaking little, her words drifting like the snow itself, falling without sound and covering the pain she did not let herself name. She could not find her father's wisdom in the stone eyes of his statue, nor her brother Brandon's laughter in the shadowed alcoves. Instead, she found resolve. Each time she left the crypt, she rose a little straighter. There were politics in the halls above. Messengers arrived by the day, bringing tidings from the south. Petty lords currying favor with a new king. Distant threats of loyalists. Rumors of dragons vanished. A fresh report of Tywin's gold swelling the coffers of the crown. The high lords quarreled in secret letters and public proclamations. But the realm was already shifting beneath them, the sands of the new order yet unsettled. In the north, old allegiances survived on silence and snow, waiting for the world to right itself or collapse into further bloodshed. Ned held council each evening, sitting at the head of the table in the great hall, his hair dark and face pale from worry. Maester Ways was always at his right, scribing letters with fingers grown stiff in the cold, offering advice with the gentle firmness that Lyanna remembered from childhood. Benjen spoke rarely but listened to every word, eyes keen as any wolf's. When Lyanna attended, at Ned's request and sometimes at her own insistence, there was a hush that fell over the lords assembled, as though they could not quite believe the winter rose had returned to guide them. She watched as her brother balanced mercy with necessity, and she learned. He gave food to small folk displaced by the war, negotiated with stubborn bannermen, oversaw repairs to the broken outer wall, where her own shadow had slipped unseen only days ago. In all things Ned led with caution and with kindness, and Lyanna saw in him a quiet strength their father had never managed to give voice to. In his presence, she felt the weight of her own future settle upon her, as real as the furs around her shoulders. The first test of that future came with the arrival of Sir Bryce Caron, lean and wary, leading a company of crown-sworn men. They were battered by the northern cold, their banners limp and streaked with salt from the road. But their eyes shone with the zeal of men who believed themselves the new realm's shepherds. Sir Bryce knelt before Ned, presented letters marked with Robert's own hand and seal, and spoke the king's command to bring Lady Lyanna south to stand as witness to the succession, to see for herself the peace her old friend had made. Ned's face was unreadable as he accepted the letter. He spoke the courtesies, offered his guest a seat by the fire, and bade servants bring mead and food for the men who had ridden so far. But when Lyanna met his gaze, she saw the flicker of uncertainty, fear that any refusal would be taken as treason, that any acceptance might mean the end of her fragile new peace. That night, she called Ned to her chamber as the snow rattled against the shutters and the hearth cast long shadows up the walls. She was seated on the bench before the fire, her hair unbound, the scar on her cheek thrown into stark relief by the flames. Ned entered quietly and stood without speaking, waiting. "I won't go south," she said, breaking the silence herself. "Not as witness. Not as prize. I will not be paraded for the sake of another's victory song. Never no." He nodded once, understanding in the line of his jaw. "They will call it defiance. Let them." Her voice was quiet, but hard as the winter ground. "I am not their symbol. The realm is done with symbols. It needs something real." Ned knelt beside her, took her hand in his, and for a long moment said nothing. Then, with a voice barely more than a whisper, he confessed, "I am afraid for you, Lyanna. Robert, he is king, but he is wounded, and he is proud. He loved you once." "He loved the girl who vanished in Dorne," she said, "and perhaps the girl loved him once too. But I am not her. I am what the war made me." She looked to the window, where the snow was gathering in drifts against the stone. "Let him have his kingdom. I want none of it." They sat together until the fire had guttered low. Ned promised to send Sir Bryce south with word of her illness. A tale Maester Wallace could abet with carefully composed missives and vague prognoses. Lyanna smiled at the subterfuge, thinking of all the secrets the North had kept, and the old gods who watched over them in the dark. The next morning, she found Benjen waiting for her at the edge of the yard, 2 horses already saddled, and a bundle of provisions slung over his shoulder. He grinned, the awkward shyness of the boy she remembered not quite chased from his features by the cold. "Thought you'd want a ride," he said. They rode out past the winter town, through the white woods where the snow hung thick and silent, muffling hoofbeats and laughter alike. Lyanna felt the world settle around her, the woods accepting her back as if she had never left, as if every bruise and scar was only a tale to be told by firelight when the night grew long. Benjen led her to the ridge above the lake, where the land fell away in a gentle sweep, and the towers of Winterfell rose in the near distance, half shrouded in the midday haze. He stopped there, reins in hand, and waited for her to speak first. "I didn't want to leave," Lyanna said quietly, eyes on the horizon. "I didn't want to go to Dorne. I didn't want to vanish." Her voice grew rough. "I didn't want to kill, but I did. I did what I had to, Benjen." He nodded, gaze steady. "That's what we do. We are Starks." She laughed, the sound bright as breaking ice. "I am so tired of being a Stark." "Then be Lyanna," he said. "You were always the best of us." She looked at him, startled. For a moment she saw not her brother, but her own childhood staring back, brighter and wilder and unmarked by grief. She reached for his hand, squeezed it. They sat side by side for a long time, not speaking. The snow fell thick, muffling the world. Lyanna closed her eyes and let herself believe, for a heartbeat, that nothing had changed at all, that she was a girl in the north and the only thing ahead was the race home before the dusk. But the dusk always comes. That night, Sir Bryce and his company left Winterfell with little ceremony, bearing letters and assurances that the Wolf Princess would recover in time, that the North would remain loyal, that the new king's peace would hold. Lyanna watched their banners dwindle in the falling snow, heart heavy but sure. For days, Winterfell settled into a hush. Repairs continued on the walls, stores were counted and salted. The small folks' needs met with patience and strictness in equal measure. Lyanna found herself drawn into the rhythms of the keep, into the lives that went on around her, advising Ned in council, sharing meals with the maester and old Sir Roderick, walking the walls at dawn and dusk, as if the pace and the cold might scour her clean. Rumors persisted, of course. Word spread through the halls of a wild she-wolf come home, of southern men seeking to claim her, of ghosts seen at the god's wood by moonlight. Old Nan, half-blind but sharp of tongue, told the children that the wolf princess had slain a king and danced through wildfire, that she carried secrets in her bones and steel in her heart. The stories grew wilder with each retelling, until the lines between legend and memory blurred. Lyanna sometimes smiled to hear herself made myth, but she did not correct them. She spent her nights in restless sleep, haunted by visions of green fire and the cries of her father and brother, by the cold steel that slipped between ribs and the weight of a newborn, lost to marsh and shadow. But there were new memories as well. A morning spent racing Benjen along the lakeshore, the laughter of children echoing through the bailey, the simple piece of bread and cheese by the fire as snow fell outside. Each day, she reclaimed a little more of the girl she had been. Each night a little more of the woman she had become. It was on the 7th day of the snow's fall that Maester Wallace summoned her to the rookery, his voice urgent. She found him hunched over a scattering of scrolls, hands trembling as he sorted through the seals and signatures. A message from the Cranagman, he said, urgent and written in code. He handed her the parchment, his eyes grave. She read the message twice, the coded phrases opening in her mind like old doors, shifting halls, silent faces, reeds in winter. The meaning was clear. Her child was safe, but danger drew near. Rumors had reached the marshes, hunters seeking the lost prince, gold-changing hands from lord to outlaw, whispers of an assassin with a Dornish blade. For a moment, the world spun. Lyanna steadied herself on the edge of the table, her knuckles white. Maester Wallace watched her with the careful eyes of a man who has seen generations pass in the same stone corridors. "You will want to go to him," he said. "I must," she whispered. That night, she went to Ned. He sat before the fire, his face gaunt and shadowed, eyes rimmed with sleeplessness. She told him everything: the message, the threat, the certainty that she must ride south, alone if need be, to protect the child she had borne. He listened, as he always had, his brow furrowed in thought. When she finished, he did not argue. He simply nodded and took her hands. "I will ride with you," he said. "No," she replied, fierce. "Winterfell needs you, the North needs you, and the child needs me. This is my road, Ned. My choice." He did not try to stop her. He only held her close, as he had when they were children, and promised that no matter what path she took, the North would wait for her return. She left before dawn, wrapped in a cloak of gray wool, sword at her hip, her heart beating slow and sure. Benjen saw her to the gate, pressing a small dirk into her palm. One of Brandon's, kept for luck. "Come home," he said, voice rough. "I will," she promised. She rode south through the snow, following the old ways along the King's Road, and through the secret tracks Howland Reed had marked for her years before. The world seemed to hold its breath as she moved through it, the snows muffling the sound of her horse's hooves, the sky pale and watchful overhead. On the 4th night, she reached the edge of the marshes. Mist clung to the water, and the air was thick with the scent of mud and green life. She dismounted, leading her horse by the bridle, stepping lightly through the reeds until the water rose around her boots. Somewhere, a bird called, a 3-note song that was not a bird at all, but a warning. She waited, letting the silence stretch. After a time, a figure slipped from the mist, a woman, slim and pale-eyed, her hair woven with rushes. She carried a spear, the tip crusted with river mud. "Howland is waiting," the woman said. Lyanna nodded and followed her through the maze of reeds and water, the way twisting and shifting with each step, until the lights of Greywater Watch gleamed dimly through the fog. The keep itself seemed half-formed, rising and sinking with the tide, windows glowing with the faint warmth of fire. Within, Howland Reed met her, his face thinner but still kind, his eyes tired but fierce. He greeted her with no words, only an embrace. He led her to the chamber where her son slept, bundled in furs, his small chest rising and falling in the deep, untroubled sleep of innocence. Lyanna knelt beside him, her hand trembling as she brushed a lock of dark hair from his brow. She did not weep. There were no tears left in her. Only a hunger as deep as winter, and a fierce resolve that nothing, no matter how sharp or shadowed, would take her child from her. She spoke to Howland long into the night. They discussed the threats that gathered. The gold passed hand to hand. The men who hunted for rumor and revenge, and the last shreds of a war that would not die. Howland promised her that Greywater would hold, that the marshes would swallow any enemy fool enough to enter, but Lyanna knew too well how small comfort could be when steel and will were arrayed against you. "I will stay," she said at last, her voice low, "until I am sure, until the threat is gone." Howland nodded, and in his eyes she saw both pride and sorrow. "You are your father's daughter," he said. And more. Lyanna spent her days watching over her son, teaching him small things: how to whistle for the marsh birds, how to tie knots, how to listen to the wind in the reeds. She rode with the crannogmen at dawn and dusk, learning their ways, the old magics whispered by moonlight and the signs hidden in the mud and water. She was stark, and she was something else as well: a mother, a wolf, a woman remade in fire and steel. The hunters came as they always do. One by one they entered the marshes, Southron knights and sellswords, a Dornishman with a blade of glass, an archer from the stepstones, a pale woman who claimed to see through mists. Some vanished without trace, taken by quicksand or silent arrows. Some left warnings nailed to the trees, threats scrawled in red ink and blood. None reached the heart of Greywater Watch. Lyanna watched, waited, learned. Each night she told her son stories, not of kings or dragons or battles, but of snow falling on Winterfell, of the wind in the pines, of a world where secrets could be kept and peace was more than an old word. She sang to him in the old tongue, her voice low and wild, weaving spells of love and protection. As the snows deepened and the world turned, the threat faded. The men who hunted her son's life were turned aside or lost, and the rumors that had drawn them grew cold. The war at last was ending, its blood and fire damped down by the slow, inexorable weight of time and winter. When Lyanna at last rode north again, her son bundled close at her side. The woods greeted her as one of their own. The people of Winterfell welcomed her not as a princess or a legend, but as kin, a Stark come home, a mother bearing her child, a woman forged in loss and returned in strength. Ned met her at the gate, his face lit by the brief, rare smile she remembered from their childhood. Benjen swept her boy into his arms and spun him through the snow, their laughter ringing out across the courtyard. Old Nan wept openly, and even Maester Wyles could not hide his trembling hands as he blessed them. That night, the fires burned bright in Winterfell. The lords of the north gathered in the great hall, not for council or war, but to break bread and tell stories. They toasted the new king in the south, but their eyes were on Lyanna and on the future she carried with her. A future not of vengeance but of peace, hard-won and fiercely guarded. As the snows fell outside, Lyanna Stark sat among her kin, her son warm in her lap, and listened to the music of the north, the wind in the stones, the laughter of her brothers, the stories old and new. For the first time in many years, she let herself believe that the world might be mended after all, that winter might end, and that hope, like the snow, could fall quietly, blanketing all that had been lost with the promise of what might yet be found. Down, beneath a sky hammered silver with frost, Winterfell awoke to the sound of bells. Not the shrill summons of alarm or the hollow peal for funerals, but something older, a rolling, resonant music that had not been heard in years, not since the days before the war and its sorrows. The bells swung in the cold dawn, their song unfurling over the battlements, slipping into the waking town beyond the walls and across the snowy fields. Lyanna stood at her chamber window, her child curled, warm against her breast, and watched the people gather. Each new morning since her return had come brighter, as if the sun itself dared more each day, as if the world was learning again that hope could root even in frozen ground. The snows had begun to thin, melted by the restless winds from the sea. Ravens came daily from the south, carrying tidings of Robert's reign, coronations and feasts, the raising of new banners, the settling of debts old and new. Lyanna read the letters as a maester would, line by line, weighing what was left unsaid as much as what was writ bold in ink. Robert's hand was everywhere, blunt and impatient. And though his words still reached north wrapped in nostalgia and longing, Lyanna knew how memory could lie. The king in the south was not the boy she had known, nor the lover she had lost, and she was no longer the girl who had danced for him at dawn in the wilds above Storm's End. Winterfell's rhythm slowly returned, piece by piece. Repairs to the gatehouse and the broken granary were nearly done. In the Godswood, the ancient heart tree stood newly crowned with buds, red sap, trickling in the spring thaw. Lyanna walked there each morning with her son, his small hand curled trustingly in hers as she showed him the secret places where she had once hidden. The mossy stone where she had first learned to climb, the root where her father had carved her name. She taught him to listen, not just to the calls of the crows and the chatter of red squirrels, but to the way the silence pressed between. In that silence, she taught him, lived the North itself. Ned kept to his duties, shouldering the cares of lordship with the same grim patience that had marked their father. He held court on the high seat, hearing complaints from tenant farmers, settling disputes among rival houses, and overseeing the last of the harvest stores. Benjen returned to the wall as winter's end drew near, his eyes gleaming with pride each time he looked at his nephew, the heir who would one day stand in his place. Maester Weiss set himself to training new boys in the healing arts, and even old Nan seemed to walk with lighter step, her stories full of laughter and the promise of spring. Lyanna watched it all, a silent thread woven through the days, present yet apart. Some nights she wandered the ramparts, her child asleep in his crib, and the castle quiet, haunted by the weight of what she had done and what she had become. In the darkness, she would recall the Tower of Joy, the flash of steel, the green fire licking across stone, the eyes of Aerys burning as she ended his madness. She remembered the ache in her side, the taste of blood, the certainty that she had crossed some line beyond which there was no returning. Yet the world had not ended. The sun had risen, her son breathed, and the North endured. Rumor, as ever, proved more persistent than truth. There were whispers of a wolf queen in the north, of a witch returned from the grave, of a boy born in the marshes with the blood of dragons in his veins. Songs sprang up among the small folk, tales of Lyanna Stark slaying kings and walking through fire, of secret meetings with the children of the forest, of a babe who would one day unite the realm. Lyanna let the stories grow. She learned to use their power, weaving rumor and silence as armor against the hungry eyes of the South. One morning, a new letter arrived, its seal pressed with the crowned stag of House Baratheon. Robert's hand was heavy on the parchment, the words running thick with longing and command. He asked, no, begged, her to come south to be queen by his side, to let the realm heal and forget. He promised peace, plenty, a future unmarred by blood. He swore he would not ask for more than she could give. She stood in the solar, the letter trembling in her hand, her child at her feet, stacking colored stones. Ned entered quietly as he often did, and waited for her to speak. He asks again, she said, her voice brittle as old ice. Ned read the letter, his lips pressed in a thin line. He does not understand. He never will. She sank onto the cushioned bench, fingers tracing the old wolf's head embroidered on the cushion. I am not his dream, Ned. I am not a prize, nor a symbol to hang his crown upon. The girl he loved died long ago, and the woman I am cannot bear the weight of his peace. Ned sat beside her, laying a gentle hand atop hers. You owe him nothing. She shook her head, sorrow sharp and clean as snowmelt. But I owe the North, and I owe myself the truth. She knelt to her son, gathering him close. We are safe here, aren't we? No one can take that from us. The worm? Ned met her gaze, his own clear and unyielding. No one. So long as the wall stands and the North is ruled by Starks. She smiled at him then, a rare and true smile, the kind that belonged only to family. Then let the king have his songs. Let the south have its peace. We will hold our own." Word was sent with all courtesy and care. A reply that was kind, final, and absolute. She wished Robert well, prayed for his happiness, and swore the North's fealty. She would not come south. She would not be his queen. The days stretched longer as spring crept northward, each one brighter than the last. The castle swelled with life, merchants returning, small folk flocking to the market square, knights and bannermen arriving to pay homage or renew their oaths. There were feasts in the great hall, music echoing from the minstrel's gallery, laughter as loud and raw as any storm. Lyanna presided at Ned's side, never the center, but always present, her eyes missing nothing, her smile as rare and sharp as moonlight on snow. Her son grew, tall for his age, fierce and clever, his hair as dark as midnight, and his eyes clear as the northern sky. The lords of the north doted on him, showering him with gifts and lessons, teaching him to ride and shoot, to speak the old tongue, and to name the trees and stars. He learned quickly, with the hunger of one who knows the world is larger than his mother's arms. One evening, as the sun set in bands of gold and rose, Lyanna found herself in the godswood, her son playing at the roots of the heart tree, his laughter ringing like bells. She sat beside him, watching the shadows lengthen, feeling the old pain rise and settle again within her chest. She remembered a time when she had knelt here in despair, blood slick on her hands, the future a dark and endless road. Now, in the hush beneath the red leaves, she felt a quiet peace, a certainty that whatever came, she would endure. A soft step on the moss made her turn. Ned entered the glade, pausing at the edge, respect and concern in every line of his face. "May I join you?" he asked. She nodded, patting the ground beside her. They sat in silence for a time, the wind moving gently in the branches above. "The lords of the north speak of you with awe," Ned said at last. "They call you the Wolf Queen, the Flame Bringer." Lyanna laughed softly. "Let them speak. Legends keep secrets better than any wall." He looked at her, grave and gentle. "Are you content?" She thought for a long moment, watching her son chase a squirrel's shadow. "I am at peace. It is not joy, exactly, but it is enough." He nodded. "We are all wounded by this war, but the North heals, slowly. You have helped us do that." Ned saw Rem. She leaned her head on his shoulder, the gesture as old as childhood. "We are all we have left, Ned. We must keep each other whole." That night, in the flickering candlelight of her chamber, Lyanna watched her son sleep. She remembered every step that had brought her here. The tower, the flames, the blood, and the loss. She remembered the faces of the dead, and the promises she had made to herself in the dark. She touched the scar on her cheek, and let the pain anchor her to the present, to the warm hush of the keep and the beating heart of her child. The years passed, slow as river ice breaking in spring. The scars of war faded, though never fully vanished. Winterfell became a haven again, a place of stories and strength. Lyanna took her place among the elders, teaching the next generation the lessons written in her bones. That peace must be guarded with courage, that truth can be a blade as sharp as any sword, that love, fierce, unyielding, can endure even the worst storms. From time to time word reached them from the south, of Robert's troubles, of the intrigues of court, of dragons whispered to have survived in the far east, of the machinations of those who coveted the Iron Throne. But those troubles seemed distant, small against the vastness of the northern sky. Lyanna knew that darkness might come again, as it always did, but she no longer feared it. She had faced fire, she had faced death, and she had survived. On the first night of the new spring, Lyanna stood atop the battlements, her son at her side, and watched the aurora shimmer in the sky above. The people of Winterfell gathered below, singing old songs, toasting to the turning of the year. The bells rang out again, their music rising to meet the lights in the heavens. For the first time in many years, Lyanna felt something close to hope, a fragile, precious thing, no less real for being hard won. She knew the cost of it, knew what she had lost, and what she had saved. She knew that the future would not be easy, that danger and sorrow would always linger at the edges of the world. But she also knew that she was not alone, and that as long as the North stood, fierce and cold and true, there would always be a place for those who refused to be broken. She held her son close, breathing in the scent of his hair, the wild tang of winter and fire, and closed her eyes against the brightness of the coming dawn. Winter had ended. The wolf had come home, and the song of ice and fire, changed forever, carried on the northern wind. Key. Spring crept into Winterfell, not as a triumph but as a shy visitor, melting snows and rivulets along the stones, and waking the earth beneath the castle's roots. Dawn rose earlier each day, washing the frosted rooftops in pale gold and tugging life from gardens, ponds, and forest. With each passing week, the scars of war faded. A wall mended here, a field replanted there, laughter echoing longer in the halls. Yet Lyanna Stark knew peace was a garden in need of constant tending, and every joy that returned carried the memory of blood beneath. She woke each morning to her son's hand warm in hers, his sleepy voice a lullaby against memories she could not shake. The North had taken her back, but it watched her warily, some out of awe, others with a guardedness sharpened by rumors carried on the spring winds. She let the whispers coil through the town and out across the Barrowlands, that she had slain a king, that she bore a secret child, that the godswood itself bent its boughs when she walked beneath its ancient leaves. Let them wonder. Mystery was the best armor left to her, now that steel and vengeance were set aside. In council, she was the still point around which the day revolved. Ned ruled with measured kindness, but deferred to her in matters where the heart ran deeper than the sword. Disputes between old houses, the fates of children orphaned by war, the restitution of wrongs that could not be weighed in coin. She heard each plea, marked each face, and answered in the voice of Winterfell's daughters, the voice of the North itself, shaped by wind and wolf and the long cold memory of loss. When night fell, she would walk the ramparts and listen to the silence. Sometimes she thought she could hear her father's voice on the wind, or Brandon's laughter, or Benjen's fearless boasts from the days before he donned the black. But more often, she heard only the gentle sound of her own breath, steady and alive, and the small heartbeat of her child sleeping safe within Winterfell's walls. No letters came from Robert for a long span, and Lyanna wondered if the king at last understood what she could not give. The North lay quiet, but not idle. Messengers from the Riverlands and Vale came with tentative proposals, alliances, betrothals, shipments of grain and timber to mend the wounds of winter. She listened politely, answered with care, and promised nothing beyond the North's friendship. She trusted Ned to hold the line against southern hunger, and he did so with all the grim determination of a Stark. The lords of the North grew to rely on her counsel, even the old wolves who remembered Rickard's heavy hand or Brandon's wildness. When Lyanna spoke, the great hall stilled. When she fell silent, no one dared fill the hush too quickly. As the day stretched into early summer, a festival was declared, ostensibly for the turning of the year, but in truth to mark the North's return to life. The people flocked from hamlets and forests, streaming through Winterfell's gates until the yards rang with music and the scent of roasting meats. Bonfires were stacked high in the fields beyond the walls, and children raced through the long grass, their laughter bright as new coins. Lyanna walked among them with her son's hand in hers, smiling at the knot of girls, braiding daisy chains for their hair, stopping to speak with old men who pressed charms of carved bone or painted wood into her palm. That night, as the moon rose, the feast was held in the great hall. Torches threw gold on the high banners, wine flowed like river water, and minstrels played until the dawn. Lyanna watched Ned at the head table, his face softer than she remembered from war's dark years, and she felt, for the first time since the tower, a fullness that was not grief or rage. Her son, grown bold with other boys his age, demanded a story for the table, and she obliged, weaving a tale of wolves and snow giants, of hidden children and ancient magics. The hall listened, breathless, as her voice rose and fell, and when she finished, a silence as profound as prayer hung for one heartbeat before the hall erupted in cheers. The morning after the festival dawned clear and warm, birds rioting in the orchards beyond the walls. Lyanna found herself restless. Leaving her son in the care of old Nan, she saddled her horse and rode out with only two companions, Sir Roderick Castle and young Willem, a stable boy too proud to let the Lady Stark ride without a squire. They crossed the open fields and slipped into the forest, where the air was cool and green, and the only sounds were the chatter of squirrels and the far-off hammer of a woodpecker. They rode for hours, following the narrow game trails that Lyanna had known as a girl, deeper into the woods than she had dared since her return. At last, they reached a clearing, its center dominated by a fallen tree draped in moss. Lyanna dismounted, handed the reins to Willem, and walked to the old trunk. She knelt, brushing away a scatter of last year's leaves, and found the name she had carved there so many summers before, Lyanna, scratched deep with a child's determined hand. She traced it, and for a moment, she was the wild girl again, running barefoot through the ferns, fearless and sure that the world would never change. She heard Sir Roderick approach but did not rise. The old knight knelt beside her, his sword unbelted, his hair silver and wild. For a long moment, they said nothing. Then Roderick spoke, voice low. "The North breathes easier for your return, my lady. The lords are at peace. The people hope." "Hope is a fragile thing," Lyanna replied, still tracing the letters. "But it's more than we had. Perhaps more than we deserve." Roderick nodded, considering. "You carry the weight well, but you mustn't bear it alone." She smiled, turning to him. "I am not alone, Sir Roderick. Not while you and Ned remain. Not while the North stands." "Listen." He rose, offering her his arm, and she accepted. Together they walked back to the waiting horses, the sunlight dappling through the trees. Lyanna mounted, cast one last look at her name carved into the old wood, and rode back toward Winterfell. Her heart lightened. Weeks passed. The North bloomed. Fields were sown and calves birthed. The markets bustled with new wares, and even the distant holds of the mountain clans sent tokens of fealty. A bearskin here, a string of silver coins there. The maester declared it the finest spring in living memory, and Lyanna found herself with days so full she almost forgot the shadows behind. But shadows are patient, and the past is never truly left behind. Late one afternoon, a raven arrived bearing a seal not seen in the North since before the war. A dragon, red as blood, pressed into black wax. The message was brief, the writing elegant and strange, but unmistakable in its implication. Across the sea, in the Free Cities, a girl named Daenerys Targaryen had survived, come of age, and claimed her father's crown by the laws of exile and memory. She wrote not to threaten, but to declare. The blood of the dragon lived, and Westeros was not yet beyond its reach. Ned read the letter aloud to the assembled council, his face grave. The lords of the North listened in silence, every word a stone thrown into the still pond of their peace. When he finished, he looked to Lyanna. She met his gaze, unflinching. "She is no threat," Lyanna said at last, her voice clear. "She is a child, alone in a world that will use her name for war and profit. We are safe here." Lord Manderley shifted his bulk. "The South will not see it so. King Robert's heart is hard toward dragons. If he learns of this, he may seek the North's sword." Ned nodded, face like stone. "We will hold our silence. We will not be the match that sets the realm ablaze again." The council murmured assent, some with more conviction than others. When the lords departed, Lyanna lingered at the council table, tracing the rings left by wine cups, lost in thought. Ned came to stand beside her. "You saw this coming," he said, "not a question." "I did," she admitted. "The wheel turns, Ned. It always does. But I will not let my son be crushed beneath it. Not this time." He touched her shoulder. "Nor I." That night, after her son was asleep, Lyanna climbed the winding stairs to the rookery. She found Maester Ways feeding the ravens, his gnarled hands gentle on the black wings. "Another message to the marshes?" he asked, seeing her approach. She nodded. "Howland must know. The reeds have a way of listening that others do not." Wally selected a large clever-eyed raven and tied the message to its leg. "The North has always been a land of secrets," he said, voice soft. It is good to have a Stark who understands their weight. Lyanna watched the raven soar into the dusk, its wings cutting the last light from the sky. She stood there a long while, listening to the wind as it tugged at her hair, thinking of Daenerys across the sea, of Robert in his court, of Ned at his window watching over the world. She thought of her son, sleeping safely within these ancient walls. She thought of hope, and how it sometimes survived only by being hidden, cherished in the silence, away from the flames of ambition and war. Days grew longer, and the news from the south turned toward festival and rivalry. Lords jostling for the king's favor, tourneys planned for the summer, new coins minted with the crowned stag's head. No word came of war, nor of Targaryen claimants, but Lyanna's instincts kept her wary. She rode the boundaries of Winterfell's lands, greeting shepherds and watching for strangers, her eyes sharp for trouble. She sent trusted men to the mountain clans with quiet warnings, and doubled the watches along the King's Road. One afternoon, as she walked the Godswood with her son, she heard a voice behind her, familiar and dear. Benjen returned from the wall, strode through the red leaves, his hair longer, his face thinner but smiling. "You look like our father in the old days," he said, embracing her with sudden warmth. Stern and stubborn and sure as winter itself. She laughed, holding him tight. "And you look like a man who's ridden through 6 storms and 3 feasts." They walked together, the child darting ahead, chasing a blue butterfly among the roots. Benjen's gaze lingered on him, proud and sad at once. "I hear tales in the south," he said quietly, "of lords hungry for power, of whispers about the boy." Lyanna's face turned to flint. "No one will take him from me, or from Winterfell." Benjen nodded. "If it comes to war again." She stopped, hand on his arm. "If it comes to war, we will do what Starks have always done. We will survive, and we will remember." He smiled, the old reckless grin returning. "I would ride with you again, Lyanna, through fire or frost." She squeezed his hand. "I know." That night, the family gathered in the great hall. Lyanna, Ned, Benjen, and the boy, surrounded by the lords and their kin. Old Nan told stories, her voice weaving magic through the flicker of firelight. Lyanna watched her son's face, wide-eyed and hungry for legend, and knew that this, more than vengeance or rule, was the future she fought for. A home unbroken, a hope undimmed. Long after the hall emptied, Lyanna sat by the window in her chamber, watching the northern lights dance above the trees. She felt the shape of her life settle around her. Not easy, not painless, but real and true as any vow. She knew the world would change again. She knew that peace was no inheritance, but a battle fought day by day, season by season. But as the dawn crept over the battlements, she smiled into the quiet and listened for the heartbeat of the North. Strong, certain, and alive. When her son woke, she bundled him in furs and carried him to the wall, where the whole world seemed to stretch below them. Fields misty with promise, forests deep and full of secrets, the air sweet with spring. She lifted him high so he could see it all, and whispered in his ear the words she had learned through fire and ice. "This is ours. This is home. Remember it. Remember me. Remember that hope is not a gift, but a duty." He pressed his small face to hers, content and fearless. Lyanna Stark, once a ghost, once a storm, stood with her son atop the world she had remade, the past behind, the future unwritten, and the spring wind blowing strong across Winterfell. As the days grew longer and the ice retreated from the land, Winterfell seemed to stand at the center of the world's renewal. The old Godswood swelled with sap and shadow, its red leaves vivid as heart's blood against the budding green. The moat brimmed with melted snow, and fish leapt in the chill water, glinting silver in the sun. In the bailey, children's laughter warred with the clang of hammers. The forge burned day and night, and horses stamped restless in the warming stables. The whole keep throbbed with anticipation, as if even its ancient stones yearned for change. Lyanna watched it all from the high balcony. Her son beside her, a wolf pup nipping at their feet. The boy was nearly 5 now. long-limbed and dark-eyed. A bundle of energy and curiosity who moved with the easy confidence of someone born to stone walls and forest trails. She called him John, though only Ned and a handful of others knew the name was his by blood, and not simply by adoption. It was a secret kept in the cold marrow of the North, and it weighed less with each year, though she felt it sometimes in her dreams. The tower, the cries, the oath she'd forced from her brother with shaking, bloody hands. Yet for all the old scars, life had become gentle, almost at times unthinkably so. The council no longer argued over grain shipments and soldiers' rations. The outer wall was whole, and the broken gatehouse stood sturdy beneath its new roof. In the villages, men began to speak of marriages, of hunting trips and fishing nets, of debts repaid and new crops sown in the fat spring earth. No more did strangers ride hard from the south, demanding oaths or hostages. Robert Baratheon, crowned and grown thick in the belly, sent fewer and fewer letters, and those he did send carried only tired affection and news of tournaments, of debts he could not pay, of lords who quarreled among themselves like hounds over scraps. Ned, too, had changed. The sharpness war had given him softened around the edges. He played with the children in the yard, and took long walks through the godswood, sometimes with Benjen at his side, sometimes alone with his own silent thoughts. There was a new peace in his movements. A weight dropped from his shoulders when he laughed with his daughter Sansa or taught Robb the sword. Lyanna saw it most clearly at dusk, when the family gathered before the hearth, the firelight warming faces grown pale through winter. There, she sat with Jon on her lap, her son's head tucked beneath her chin, and let herself forget the old pains, just for an hour. But outside the North, the world moved on with its own currents. Messengers came less often, but sometimes they brought troubling news. Famine in the Reach, bandit lords preying on the river traffic, Dorne whispering vengeance for old wounds. None of it touched Winterfell directly, but Lyanna listened keenly. Eyes narrowed over her cup, heart wary. She had learned well how peace could shatter in a day. It was during one such evening, as a warm rain drummed against the shutters, and the air was thick with the scent of new earth, that a raven arrived bearing a seal she recognized immediately. A white falcon in flight, the sigil of House Arryn. Ned broke the wax at the table, and his face darkened as he read. "It's Jon Arryn," he said, passing the letter to Lyanna. "He asked me to come to the Eyrie, alone if I can, or with you, Lyanna, if you will. He says there are things we must discuss, matters of the highest import." He would not say more. Benjen frowned. "Is it the king?" Ned shook his head. He hints at trouble in the south. Something to do with the Lannisters, perhaps, or old debts. But he is careful. He trusts no one. Lyanna tapped the parchment, feeling a chill beneath her breastbone. "Jon Arryn is no fool. If he calls, there is a reason. But I will not leave Jon, my son, unguarded here, not for any lord in the south." "Nasmo." "Then you should ride together," Benjen offered. "Take a strong company, and I will keep Winterfell. No harm will come to the boy." Ned looked at her, a question in his eyes, but she nodded, feeling the old resolve wake within her. "We will go then. We will see what weighs on Jon Arryn's mind." Preparations were swift. The company chosen for the journey numbered 20 men, seasoned guards, half of them handpicked by Ned, the rest old friends of House Stark. Maester Wallis packed herbs and letters. 2 wet nurses were enlisted for the journey, one to care for Jon, the other for Ned's youngest. They rode south 2 mornings later, passing under the high arch of Winterfell's gate, banners snapping overhead. Lyanna kept her son close in the saddle, her sword at her hip, the wind fresh in her hair. The road south felt at first like a kind of rebirth. The spring flowers nodded along the roadside, and the air was sweet with the promise of rain. At night, Lyanna watched the stars from her tent, listening to Jon's even breathing and the distant laughter of the guards. She tried not to think of the tower, of blood or fire. The world seemed, for a while, made only of green-growing things. It was not until they crossed the neck and entered the flat, rain-soaked lands of the Riverlands that Lyanna sensed the first tremor of unease. The people in the villages looked pinched and wary. The innkeepers answered their questions in half-truths, glancing always over their shoulders. On the third night, a band of armed men shadowed their camp. But Ned's men, well-armed and alert, sent them running before they could draw blood. "What is it?" Ned asked that night, as Lyanna stood by the fire, her hand on Joan's shoulder. "Something stirs in the south," she replied, voice low. "Old feuds, new ambitions. I smell fear everywhere we stop." Ned grimaced. "Robert's peace is a thin shield. If it cracks, we will stand," Lyanna said, fierce and certain. "We are not alone." They pressed on, forded the tumbling rivers, and wound through the stony passes that led to the Aerys. At last, after 2 weeks on the road, they reached the Vale, its wild green slopes falling away beneath the pale blue sky, the mountain stronghold rising above them like a dream from the old stories. The climb to the Aerys was hard and slow, the mules laden with their packs, the narrow path winding through air cold enough to sting even a northern heart. John, small but stubborn, gripped the pommel of Lyanna's saddle and never complained, though his teeth chattered with each gust. At last, just as dusk spilled purple across the sky, they rode beneath the walls and into the moonlit courtyard. John Arryn awaited them in his solar, surrounded by half a dozen trusted men and a scattering of old books. He rose at once to greet them, his hair whiter than snow, his eyes sharp as a hawk's. "Lord Stark, Lady Lyanna." His voice was weary, but warmth flickered beneath. "You honor my house with your presence." Ned clasped the older man's arm. "You summoned," we answered. "What troubles you, John?" Arryn waved them to seats, pouring wine as the servants withdrew. His gaze darted to John, who now curled in Lyanna's lap, dark eyes wide. "You have kept your promise, I see." Lyanna inclined her head. "He is safe. He is strong." Arryn's smile was faint. "There are those who would see all Targaryen blood washed from the world, Lyanna. You know this. Even now, in Robert's court, the Lannisters press for a reckoning. They call for purges, for names. They watch for any sign, any rumor. That Rhaegar's line endures." Ned's face hardened. "They will not find it in the north. Nor in the Vale, I trust." "No," Arryn said. And in that single word was the force of a lifetime's will. "But their reach grows. There's talk of gold sent east, of assassins hired in Bravos and Lys. I fear for the girl Daenerys as much as for your John, Lyanna. They will not stop with the dragon." Lyanna felt John's head heavy against her arm, the soft weight of his trust a shield and a wound both. "What would you have us do?" Arryn looked between them, weighing his answer. "I ask for nothing but vigilance. Keep the boy close. Keep your sword sharp. Trust few and never the king's hand, for he is guided more by his heart than his head." He leaned forward, his voice dropping. "I have reason to believe there are those who would move against you, quietly at first. Poison in your food. A knife in the dark. I have sent word to trusted allies in the city, but my strength is not what it was." Ned set his jaw. "You are not alone, John." Arryn smiled, a sudden flash of gratitude brightening his pale features. "I know. That is why I called you here. If anything should happen to me, if I should fall, look to the east. There are those in the free cities who remember the old alliances, and there is power in names." The council lasted long into the night. When Lyanna finally returned to her chamber, John already fast asleep. She stared into the darkness, listening to the wind that keened around the towers. The past was not so easily buried. She thought of Aerys, his last words bubbling from a slit throat, the way the green fire had licked up the walls and turned all certainty to ash. She thought of Rhaegar, dead on the trident, his harp strings snapped. She thought of Robert, grown fat and weary in his crown, and of the girl Daenerys, adrift across the sea. Most of all, she thought of her son, his laughter, his questions, the way he reached for her hand in sleep. He was the future, and he was all she had left of the promise and pain of her youth. She would not let him be a sacrifice to another man's ambition, not now, not ever. The days at the Aerys were tense but peaceful. John played with the falcons. entranced by their fierce cries and sudden flights. Ned met with Aeryn's men, learning what he could of the threats whispered on the wind. Lyanna walked the heights, her eyes always scanning for shadows. At night, she dreamed not of fire, but of snow falling, covering everything in a clean, silent shroud. It was 3 weeks before they rode north again, their farewells brief but heartfelt. Aeryn pressed his signet into Ned's hand. "For when words are not enough," he said simply, "use it only if you must." The ride home was somber, the threat of shadow men following them like a second company. Yet as they passed back into the forests of the north, Lyanna felt some of her tension fade. She was home again, her son riding ahead, calling out the names of birds and trees, as though he could bind the land to his will. They reached Winterfell in the first blush of autumn. The harvest was in, the stores full, the people healthy and content. Ned returned to his seat with a new caution, posting trusted guards at the gates, quietly vetting all new arrivals. Maester Woyos brewed antidotes and taught the kitchen women to recognize poison. Lyanna resumed her walks through the Godswood, her son at her side, her sword never far from hand. Through that autumn, the north remained quiet. Rumors of war faded, and the realm, for a time, seemed content to forget the old blood and old betrayals. But Lyanna kept her watch, never quite letting herself rest. She told Jon stories each night, stories of courage and cleverness, of old kings and clever wolves who kept their secrets safe. She taught him to read the stars, to track the wind, to listen for the difference between friend and foe in the hush before dawn. Years would pass before the South remembered the North in earnest. When that day came, Lyanna Stark would be ready, not a girl in a tower, nor a queen unbowed, but a woman of the North, fierce as the winter wind, bearing in her arms the hope of all she had lost and all she had fought to save. In the frost-touched light before dawn, she would stand atop Winterfell's walls, her son beside her, and watch the world unfold. The wolf had come home, and the North remembered. Ingay. Ezra-K. The snows returned with the first howling wind of autumn, sharp and sudden, swirling through Winterfell's towers, and settling in the cracks between old stones. It was a warning, not just of the season's change but of the world beyond. Of those who watched, waited, and whispered. Lyanna felt the cold before it touched her skin, felt it in the marrow where memory never melted, and as the moonless nights lengthened, so too did her vigilance. Winter was always a question asked of the North, and its answer was never simple. Within the walls, life pressed forward, indifferent to rumors. Fires burned day and night in every hearth. The kitchens steamed with boiling kettles, the air rich with the smell of onions and roasting venison. Children, hares and Neds, and the many fosterlings who passed through, raced along the corridors, darting between the legs of patient servants. Old Nan told her tales by the hour, filling the keep with stories so wild that even the youngest squires grew wide-eyed at the mention of giants in the woods or shadowcats on the moor. Lyanna loved these days, and she marked each one by the light in her son's face as he learned the ways of Winterfell. Jon was growing into his name, a boy of quiet confidence who rode with the stable hands, and lingered in the Godswood as if the old trees whispered secrets for his ears alone. He took to swordplay with the same stubbornness she remembered in Brandon, but he listened to the lessons of silence and patience from Ned. When he laughed, it was always sudden and bright, like the crack of sunlight between clouds. Ned's eldest, Robb, was his mirror, steady, proud, quick to take blame, slow to judge. Sansa and Arya bickered in the women's hall, one with a harp and a soft song, the other with a wooden sword she'd carved herself. Bran scrambled up walls. Benjen sometimes brought stories from the wall, and little Rickon followed the pack as best he could, never crying when he fell, though he never failed to find his mother's arms at day's end. There was peace in it, but never forgetfulness. Lyanna walked the ramparts at night, her cloak drawn tight, the stars wheeling overhead in the frozen black. She kept a hand always near her sword, eyes trained to the shadows, listening for the soft scuff of boots or the sigh of a door unlatched. Ned respected her watchfulness, and when he asked her in private what haunted her, She would only shake her head, unwilling to burden him with every phantom that trailed her. "Peace is never truly ours," she said once, standing with him beneath the heart tree, crimson leaves drifting down. "We borrow it, as we borrow the sun between storms." He gripped her hand and kissed her brow. "But we keep it as long as we can." And so they did. One evening, as the snows drifted heavy against the windows, and the wind whistled down from the wall, a rider arrived. He wore the livery of House Reed, mud-brown and green, marked with a stylized Cranagman's spear. The rider was small and slight, half a boy himself, but his message was grave. Howland Reed requested Lyanna's presence at Greywater Watch. No further detail was given, but the urgency was clear. She left at first light, wrapped in furs, with 2 guards and John at her side. The journey south through the Barrowlands was both a return and an exile. The marshes, thick with the scent of peat and decay, welcomed her as if she'd never left, swallowing her company into the misty hush that only the old gods could understand. Cranagmen appeared in the fog, faces painted, silent as frogs, and led them by unseen paths to the shifting towers of Greywater. Howland was waiting in the hall, older and thinner than she remembered, but his eyes just as keen. He welcomed John with a tight embrace and pressed Lyanna to his side with a whisper meant for her alone. "The world is waking again, old friend. There are those who listen and those who move in the dark." They met that night in a chamber lit by the glow of fat candles. The Crannog Lord unrolled a map and pointed to places Lyanna had never seen. Dots on the narrow sea. Names whispered of ships leaving Lys and Mer under moonless skies. "Spies," he murmured, "and men who deal in secrets. They hunt not just for Targaryens, but for any threat to the king's peace. Gold flows like river water through the free cities. Assassins, sells words, spies, all with ears turned west." Lyanna leaned forward, studying the marks. "Do they know of John?" Howland shook his head. "Not yet. But word grows wilder with distance. In the south, they say the North harbors a dragon's bastard. In Bravos, they say the bastard of Winterfell rides a wolf as big as a horse. It is only a matter of time." Lyanna's jaw clenched. "And Daenerys?" Howland's mouth twisted. "No one knows. The girl is a wisp, sometimes in Pentos, sometimes in the shadow of Volantis. Spies watch her, yes, but others shield her. She has allies the king does not dream of." They sat in silence, the candles guttering. Lyanna's thoughts ran back to the tower, to her desperate flight, and the promises made over her son's sleeping form. "I will not hide him forever," she said at last, "but neither will I hand him to their blades." "You may have to choose, Lyanna," Howland warned gently. "One day, the secret will be a sword in someone's hand." She nodded, accepting the burden again. "I have lived with swords before." Before dawn, she and John began the return journey. The Cranagmen gave them talismans carved from driftwood and sent them away by a different path than they'd come. On the ride home, John rode beside her, silent and watchful. He was old enough now to understand there were secrets adults would not speak, and clever enough to guess they concerned him. She wanted to tell him everything. About Rhaegar and the war and the world's hunger for names, but for now she only squeezed his hand, promising in silence that she would never let him go. Winterfell's gates were hung with boughs of pine when they returned. The keep was thick with the scents of fresh-cut greenery, roasted nuts, and honeyed wine. It was the festival of the longest night, a time for feasting and stories, for the giving of gifts and the honoring of ancestors. Ned welcomed her home with a tight, silent embrace, and the children crowded around, eager to show her the candles they'd made, the snow lanterns they'd shaped, the cakes baked with more enthusiasm than skill. The night of the feast, the hall glowed with firelight. Every bannerman and house retainer packed the benches. The village folk squeezed into every niche. Old Nan spun tales of the first Starks who walked in the shape of wolves, of the giants who carved the hills, of the white shadows who haunted the woods when the world was young. The singers strummed their harps and pipes, the men drank, the children danced until they tumbled laughing into sleep. Lyanna sat beside Ned, Jon at her side, and felt a warmth deeper than wine fill her chest. She watched the flames flicker on her son's face, saw the mingling of blood and chance that had brought them all here. Alive together, safe for a moment more. After the feast, she went alone to the God's Wood. The snow lay deep, but her feet found the old paths. The heart tree's face was thick with shadow, its eyes weeping slow red. She knelt, pressed her palm to the rough bark, and whispered her fears and her hopes into the hush. The cold stung her cheeks, but she let herself weep, quiet, aching tears for her father, for Brandon, for the dreams she'd lost and the ones she'd made anew. When she stood, she was not lighter, but steadier. The seasons spun on. Jon grew into his own shape, quick to smile, quicker to defend the small and weak, tireless on a horse, and fearless in the woods. The people of Winterfell, who had once whispered about the Wolf Queen and her secrets, came to love him for his easy manner and restless energy. Ned's sons and daughters claimed him as brother, and none could tell from watching them that Jon's birth was anything but the product of old northern magic. Trouble came, as it always does. Bandits in the hills, a sickness that swept the lower villages, rumors of new pretenders rising in the riverlands. But the North weathered it all, together, watchful, enduring. Lyanna took her place at the council, her word as strong as any lord's. Her bond with Ned deepened into something fierce and wordless, a partnership of trust that nothing could shake. She never lost her vigilance. Spies still traveled the King's Road from time to time, and twice a letter arrived that spoke of gold for information, or of a stranger seen near the walls at dusk. Each time, Lyanna's people found the intruders, and each time the secrets of the North were kept, sometimes with words, sometimes with steel. In the coldest part of the year, when the world seemed to shrink to firelight and frost, a raven arrived from the wall. Vengeance wrote of strange things. The dead not staying dead, shadows with blue eyes haunting the woods, wildlings fleeing south in numbers never seen. The letter was grave, the words weighted with fear. Lyanna read it twice by firelight, then brought it to Ned. Together they sat in the great hall, the windows latticed with frost, the hush as deep as the heart of the earth. "It begins again," Ned said, voice flat. Lyanna nodded, her heart slow and sure. "Winter is not the enemy, but the test. We have endured before." Ned looked at her, his eyes the color of storm. "We will endure again." And so, as the new snows fell, and the world turned ever onward, Lyanna Stark stood at the center of the storm, not untouched by pain, but stronger for it. She watched her son grow, watched the North mend its wounds, watched the horizon for shadows. She bore the past as armor and the future as hope, and when the wind howled across the battlements, she faced it with eyes wide open and heart unbowed. In the end, it was not vengeance that defined her, nor loss, nor even the wild defiance that had shaped her youth. It was this: a promise kept, a hearth defended, a legacy guarded in the heart of winter. The North remembered, and so would the world, for as long as its stories were told.